Hello there, it's Juliana Michaels, and I'm so excited to be with you here on the Ranger Ink YouTube channel. In this video, I'm using the Tim Holtz Distress Oxide Minis to create a Halloween card with loads of inky layers. Now let's get into it. So for this video, I'm going to be working with the Baddie stencil from Tim Holtz, and then several stamp sets, including Boo Crazy, Gothic Tapestry, and Wicked Hipsters. And then I'm going to be working with some of the new Distress Oxide minis, and I've got Dusty Concord, Villainous Potion, Rusty Hinge, Crackling Campfire, Peeled Paint, Rustic Wilderness, Antique Linen, Gathered Twigs, and Black Soot. The other things I'll be using are a Distress Sprayer, and then some Dina Wakley Gloss Spray in black. And then the paper I'm working with is Distress Watercolor Cardstock. Now let's get into the making. So for the first layer on the card, we're going to take the Baddie stencil, and I've got it attached to a piece of Distress Watercolor Cardstock using just some washi tape. And I'm working on the smooth side, and I've cut it down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches so that I can mat it onto another layer. And I'm going to take some of the Distress Oxide inks here and start applying them through the stencil in kind of like a gradiated type of application. So I'm going to start off kind of with this lighter Rusty Hinge, and then we're going to add a little darker of an orange with the Crackling Campfire, and just applying that through the stencil there. And now we're going to go on to some peeled paint. And as you can see, I've just got the same brush for both of the colors that are the same. So if I'm in the green, I'm using one brush and then a different brush for the orange. I'll do the Rustic Wilderness for a little darker green here. And then now I'll do a little bit of the purple with the Dusty Concord. And I really like using this sort of a brush when applying the inks through a stencil, because it kind of lets you get in a little bit more into the detailed corners with the stencils versus trying to use like the foam blending brushes, which those will work, but it's harder to get in especially on the bats, so these little corners. These brushes work real well for that. Then you can go back and just kind of add it a little bit more if you want to get it a little darker. And now I'm going to go back and kind of start blending. So I'll take some of that Dusty Concord, and if you need to in between, you can kind of wipe off some of the excess ink. So if I want to get a little bit of that lighter color, go back and add that in here and kind of blend those two together. And then we'll go back in here with a little bit with the Rustic Wilderness. I'll wipe off some of that excess and then grab some more of that peeled paint. Just kind of blend those a little bit more. And get a little more with the Crackling Campfire. And then I'll do a little bit more here with the Rusty Hinge. And then we can just lift off the stencil and reveal our design here. And now we're going to take a couple of stamps, like a script stamp and a music stamp from the Gothic Tapestry stamp set, And I'm just going to start with applying just some of this rusty hinge to the stamp here. Just kind of loosey-goosey. And then I'm going to give that a little mist with my distress sprayer to kind of get that ink flowing and activated a little bit. And then I'm using my fingers and I'm just going to kind of stamp across this upper part here. And just kind of use my fingers to kind of tap it down in over kind of the area where we did the orange bats. And we'll clean that off. And then we're going to take the peeled paint with the music notes and kind of do the same thing. Get that little spritz. Stamp that here over kind of the green area. You do as little or as much of that as you like. And then we're going to do that one more time with the Dusty Concord and the script. And I think I do want a little bit more, I think, of the music notes. So I'm going to ink up a little section here. And kind of tap that in here and there. There we go. So you can see, you can kind of keep adding to that as you like. If you want, you know, more of any of the colors in areas that maybe you missed here or there. You can always just go back and add a little more in here and there. And then we're just going to set this to the side and let this dry, or you can kind of dry it with your heat tool. So next I'm going to take the spiderweb stamp from the Boo Crazy and I'm going to stamp it over the top of this. So I'm just going to kind of get it situated here so that it's covering the whole background. And then for this I'm going to stamp with Archival ink just to have a nice solid detailed design to kind of pop against that Distress Oxide background we've created. And if you want to stamp that a couple times to get a really dark, detailed design, you can. And then to distress this a little bit, or grunge it up, or make it a little more moody, I'm going to take some black soot oxide ink and a blending tool here. And I'm just kind of wiping that excess onto my craft mat, and then I'm just going to kind of pull that in kind of a circular motion around the outside edge here. And you can pull that in as far as you want, just kind of stick into the edges here. But the more you pull it in, you're really going to kind of create like a vignette type effect there in the center. There we go. And then from here, I'm going to take my distress sprayer and add some spritzes with some water. So I'm just going to pull the trigger really slow so I kind of get some bigger droplets. And I'm going to kind of add them more around the outside edge here, where I just did that black soot. Go. And then we can give that a dry. So now, if you really like this kind of more white leaning background, you could leave it at this point and finish embellishing it. Or if you'd like to add a little more color to it, then you could take some of the Oxide ink, wipe a little bit of that excess off onto your craft mat, and then just apply that kind of over the area where you already have the Dusty Concord. Just kind of lightly go over that. Now if you get a spot where maybe you get too much, it's all right, it's okay. And I'll do the same thing here with a little bit of the peeled paint. And really the trick to not getting too much is to kind of wipe that off onto your craft mat first and then go over onto your paper. You can always add more. And then just kind of pull that ink over from the craft mat onto your background. Here we are. And then a little more here with the rusty hinge. Same thing, kind of wipe that off onto the craft mat and then pull that over into that area. There we go. And then if you wanted to add some more splatters over this, that'll just add another little layer of interest since we added that layer of inking. And then you can set that to the side to dry, or you can dry this with your heat tool as well. And then the final step for the background here is I'm going to add some splatters using the Dina Wakley Media Gloss Spray in black. Just shook that up really well to make sure it was all mixed in. Then I'm just going to remove the nozzle. Make sure I got a little bit of it paint on the end of it. And then I'm just going to tap that onto my background to create some splatters. And then we'll just set that to the side and let that dry, and the background is complete. Next, I'm going to create the embellishments for the card, and I'm going to stamp the Wicked Hipster and a bow tie here onto some distressed watercolor cardstock, and I'm going to stamp that with some Archival ink just to give me a nice crisp image. And if you need to stamp that a couple times because you're working on the watercolor cardstock, that's quite fine. But I do recommend some watercolor cardstock because we are going to be adding some watercoloring to this. And now we're going to take some distress oxides. Got gathered twigs, and grab a little paper towel again here, and I'm just going to tap off a little bit of this onto my craft mat. This is one thing I love about the little mini oxides, is just to give you access to a little bit of ink without feeling like you're wasting too much of it. And I'm just going to pick that up with my water brush here and color in his hair. So you can make his hair whatever color you want. And if you need more ink, just smush a little bit more down on there. And again, it doesn't need to be perfect. And then we'll color in his mustache. And if you get too much ink or water coming out, just tap it off onto your paper towel and then go again. There. I'll clean that off. Now I'm going to take a little bit of the antique linen and do the same thing, but color in this skull here. So really just need to put it into the kind of the open areas because the other areas are kind of like a little shadow, so the color is not necessarily going to show up that great over that. But if you get too much of this over the stamped image, it will kind of cover up some of that detail because there's pigments in this Oxide ink. That gives you a nice easy way to color them. And then I'm going to color in his bow tie, use a little rusty hinge for that. And I'm picking the rusty hinge for his bow tie because the way the order of the bats are on the background we created. The orange is up here, so then we'll have his orange bow tie down towards the bottom. So it'll kind of help balance that color a little bit. But you see here, they're like if you get too much color on there, it can kind of cover up some of that stamping detail, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Just something to be aware of. So then we're going to let this dry. You can either use your heat tool to speed up the drying or just set it to the side to dry. And then you're just going to take some scissors and trim around the edges of these images to cut out the design. And then where this little section is with his mustache, I'm going to kind of trim off some of that extra long bit because it gets really thin and hard to trim around. So we're just going to give him a little stash trim and then just continue trimming around things. And then once you get those trimmed out, you can take your blending tool that you used the black soot on and just kind of take some of that excess ink and just ink around the edges a little bit. That'll kind of hide that white edging, and it'll also kind of cover up if there's any spots that you didn't trim super good or get close enough and there's still a little white edge showing. So to finish off the card, I attached the background, a piece of black cardstock, and then I added some double-sided foam adhesive to the back side of the Wicked Hipster and the bow, just to give that a little bit of dimension on the background there. And then for the sentiment, I heat embossed it onto a piece of black cardstock using Ranger white embossing powder, and then pop that up with some foam tape as well. And there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this bit of Halloween inspiration using the new Ranger Distress Mini Oxides. If you're interested in any of the supplies I used in this video, you can check out the full supply list in the description box below. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, stay crafty, my friend.